Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin with a panel discussion today, and as I introduce the panellists, in fact I'd invite all of them to come up to the stage and I'll introduce them as they come. We have stakeholders representing a whole range of different interests and different facets of planning reform. Geoff Gallop has a long-standing career within local and state government. You might remember him from such things as being the Premier of Western Australia. Since retiring from politics, he's been a professor and director of Sydney University's Graduate School of Government. Please make him welcome. Joining him, Steve Albin. Come on up, Steve. Steve is the CEO of the Urban Development Institute of Australia. He's been in that role since 2009. He has more than a decade of experience specialising in finance, public policy and business strategy. He's on the panel today to share with us his in-depth knowledge of the property and development industry. Make him welcome. Lucy Turnbull barely needs an introduction. She's the former Lord Mayor of Sydney and now a businesswoman and company director. She lists her two main interests as cities and their planning, and governance and prosperity and in technical innovation. She's currently the Deputy Chair of the Committee for Sydney. Please welcome Lucy Turnbull. Carolyn McNally has been very busy lately, I think it's fair to say. She's the Deputy Director General for Planning and Programs at the Department of Transport. And when they say that she oversees planning across all transport modes in the state, if you watch the news at night and know about all the road and rail plans that we've seen coming out of Macquarie Street in the last few months, you can get a sense of how many weekends she's had off. Not many, I would imagine. Please welcome Carolyn. Sarah Hill's a planner. She is the Director of Hill PDA and has over 15 years of international planning experience. She's currently doing a PhD at the University of Sydney in the field of planning and economics, and she is the President of the New South Wales Division of the Planning Institute of Australia. Welcome, Sarah. Melissa Watkins is in from Dubbo. Give her a special welcome. She's the Director of Environmental Services for the Dubbo Regional Council and has been selected by the department to share her knowledge and point of view about regional local government as a representative. Welcome her. And last but certainly not least, Van Lee is an active member of the Pyrmont Precinct Community Group, and the department selected her to be on today's panel to share her opinions and views from a community group perspective. So please welcome all of our panellists. I have a couple of questions to put to the panellists, but I can't imagine that I would have better questions than anyone in the room. So what I'm going to do is get my questions out of the way as quickly as possible, and then we will hear your questions to the panellists. This is really designed to set up the day, to start to flesh out what are the issues for this planning reform. So please have a little bit of a think about what questions you want to ask the panellists, and when I wrap up, we'll be coming around the room with microphones to hear your questions. So let's begin. I think the first question to everyone really is, what is the critical change that your stakeholders want to see? Now, Geoff Gallop, we'll start with you. You've had experience in WA and you've been involved here in New South Wales in this reform. What is critical from the perspective of the state government decision makers?
Well, I think if one is in a position of making a decision for the future of New South Wales and its planning system, in other words, the Minister and the government, it goes without saying that the government will want the necessary decisions that have to be made for the future to be made effectively and efficiently. But the new element of the system, I think, is that if they're to do that, if it's to be an effective response to the challenges of the future and it's done in a timely way, the community have to be involved. And I think that was the point the Minister was making about his visit in the United States, that somehow or another we created a notion that there are the civil society and the people over here and there's the government over here, and they're at war. And in some respects there's always going to be some tensions there. But the way forward is to embrace the community, involve them in a proper way at each level of the process. That will differ, but I think community engagement to achieve results would be my view.
And Lucy Turnbull, from the Commonwealth perspective, talk to us about that. What are the changes that the Commonwealth, I'm here in the middle of the room, want to see from planning in New South Wales?
Well, The COAG Reform Council, which Geoff was then chair of, wrote a report which was advised by a city's expert panel that I was a member of. And we saw the biggest challenge in the New South Wales system was to have a better approach to integrated planning between transport, land use, utilities, infrastructure. Everything needed to be much better integrated. There needed to be much greater certainty and clarity about, that's outside the COAG report, but our cities, and Sydney being one of them, our capital cities, are at a watershed moment for strategic planning, because every single city around Australia, but I would say above all Sydney, needs to get much better at managing the growth, population and economic growth, sustainability, all sorts of sustainability, and the productivity challenges that our country faces. And that has to happen, that conversation and action has to happen at a national level, it has to happen at a state level, and it really has to happen at a local level too.
All right, turning to Van Lee, I guess it's not particularly controversial to say that often community groups have felt with the current planning system disenfranchised, whether or not that's an accurate view of how involved they can be. But keeping that in mind, as a member of the community, what are you hoping will be different about the new system?
I think the system at the moment, in terms of how the community is engaged, is very much like telling your manager that there are things that he or she could do to improve and never seeing that feedback loop come back to you. And so one of the things I think we're really looking forward to seeing is not only the chance to participate and be engaged throughout the whole process, but also to have thoughtful consideration of the ideas and their merits, and actually have the feedback from the decision makers to hear what's been taken on board, what are the reasons for the decisions that are made, and have the confidence that the issues that are brought to the table are properly considered and given the due weight that they deserve.
Does the community want a partnership, or do they want local government and planners and other stakeholders to just get on with it?
I think you need that partnership for local government to be able to get on with it. And I recognise that every community group is incapable of representing every part of the community, and for the key reasons why we can't get on with it is because at the moment when the decisions need to be made, that's also when the community finds out in its full terms and conditions what we are really dealing with and what we are faced with, and it is only at that time that we can actually make informed input into the process, because that's the time that we can object. But for that to change and for people to be able to get on with it, we need to be involved throughout the process so that there are no surprises, and we know when is the best opportunity to provide constructive input and for that input to be taken seriously and responded to.
And Steve, Albin, is that something that you'd echo? No surprises? Is that what the developers want to see?
Yeah, well, look, I think certainty is critical in any reforms that take place on the planning system. I think another part of some of the reforms should be, we need to look at the moment we've got an adversarial system, where it pits government departments even against each other, community against developer, local government against developer. I think we need to go forward with a system that is based on agreement, and that will be key. So getting the agreement, having the certainty, understanding what your obligations are as a developer, in terms of payments for infrastructure, in terms of strategic planning, and in terms of where the community gets involved and where it doesn't get involved, will be some of the challenges, but I'm sure they can be addressed.
All right, Sarah Hill, what does the planning profession want to see from the new system?
Well, I've had a lot of discussions with planners in this space, and very much what planners are looking to see and looking to find is a system that allows them to undertake a role that actually brought them into the industry in the first place, and that is to create positive communities, whether they be in metropolitan areas, regional areas, rural areas. And to do that, we need a plan and we need a vision. And planners need to be able to become vision makers. But to be able to do that, we need plans that are actually built on the energy and the ideas that come from the community, from the economic viability that comes from the developers, and most importantly is a plan that has a shared vision and can go forward with funding for infrastructure as well. So I think most importantly, planners are looking for a system. Thank you. planners are looking, and I don't think that's working either.
Why don't I give you
I'll just talk
mine?
very loudly.
I think you're doing pretty well. Sorry.
I think planners are looking for a system that allows the community also to work with them.
Melissa, thanks for your patience. Dubbo's already doing a lot right. I mean, what do you need to see from a reformed planning system?
Certainly, I think the priority for local government would be a simplified system. It's a system that can be actually sold to a community, and a community can understand a process, both a developer and potentially a community that's affected by development. I think it needs to be a much simpler process that still allows that connection to the community to make local decisions on local matters, but taking advantage of a more regional context. So the strategic planning that goes behind the new legislation needs to make sure that we can make those long-term decisions, but still that we're engaging with our local communities and delivering their local aspirations on a local level.